I was just saying to somebody outside that this talk is the result of 5 years of grief and guilt. And I wasn't going to be in my talk, but I thought, that's so good, I'm going to start with that. It's the result of 5 years of grief and guilt. One of the challenges of mobile is it gives you new ways of interacting with the device, such as swiping across the device. But when such things are unexpected by your users, how do you assist them in knowing about these new opportunities, and how do you make them so they're confident with how your app uses these opportunities? And so onboarding is about getting your users to that confident place. If you've got the resources to hold your users' hands, then help desks are one way of getting around this problem. I'm looking expectant. Have we got any sound? It's okay, it's in Norwegian, who cares? Read the subtitles.
Ja, så jeg har ikke fått gjort noen ting hele formiddagen.
Okay, nei, jeg beklager at det tar tid. Altså, skjønner vi holder på å legge om til et helt nytt system, og da skal alle ha hjelp på en gang.
Ja.
Så du kommer ikke inn i den, eller?
Nei, den bare ligger der.
Ok, har du forsøkt å åpne den?
Ja, åpne den, altså hvis det hadde vært så enkelt, så hadde jeg jo ikke tilkalt helpdesk, hadde jeg vel?
Nei.
Du har fått på en vann?
Nei, det skal være fort gjort, det skal vi se. Du bare gjør der. Sånn.
Ja.
Da er du i gang.
Ja, altså så langt kom jeg også.
Ok.
Men så stoppet opp, og så var jeg redd for at noe av teksten skulle forsvinne, så jeg turte ikke å gå videre.
Åja, ok. Nei, men du skjønner at inni her, så ligger det kanskje flere hundre sider med lagret tekst. Så for å komme videre, så tar du tak i et ark på den måten her, og så liksom blar du over på neste side sånn. Da fortsetter teksten der.
Jeg blar, altså?
Du blar, ja.
Men når jeg skal tilbake da?
Ja, da bare blar du tilbake igjen, tar tak der, og så gjør du sånn. Der, så er du tilbake til den teksten du hadde sa, ikke noe...
Ok, så den slutter der, og så fortsetter den der, ja. Ok, men når jeg skal avslutte for dagen, hva gjør jeg da?
Da bare slår du sammen permene.
Ja?
På den måten der. Sånn. Der ligger alt lagret inni der.
Altså, jeg risikerer ikke å miste noe av teksten her nå.
Ja, alt ligger lagret inni her nå. Da må du i tilfelle sette fyr på hele greia. Det er kanskje lite sannsynlig. Så.
Ja, ok. Nei, men for det er noe med det at når du har holdt på med skriftruller, så tar det litt grann tid å konvertere til å bla i en bøk. Ja. Ja, men du, en til før du går. Jeg må bare gå gjennom en gang til. Altså, jeg åpner... Sånn,
ja, riktig.
Og så, hva har du kalt det?
Blar.
Jeg blar.
Ja, blar videre.
Blar frem og tilbake.
Ja, teksten ligger der helt.
Ja, og når jeg er ferdig, så bare lukker jeg den.
Ja,
flott.
Fint det.
Kjempefint.
Ja, flott det.
Ja, men du, vent, ikke sant? Nå er den sånn igjen, nå får jeg ikke åpnet den.
Ja, du er fra feil side. Du må åpne fra andre siden.
Så det er ikke likegyldig det, altså?
Ja, du må åpne fra den siden der. Sånn. Der. Der er den åpen.
Ja vel.
Har du lest manualen, eller?
Manualen?
Det skal følge med som manualen som brukerveiledning. Det er sikkert den der. Der, vet du.
Åja, den, ja.
Så alt sammen.
Ja, men ikke sant, der har du samme problemet. Får den ikke opp. Åpnet den,
Ok, det skulle vi kanskje ha tenkt på.
The other thing we learned from that is canned laughter is a bad idea. But that, in a sense, is the problem of onboarding, that your users are used to something else and you're trying to show them what to do. So if you can't, for all your users, provide a help desk, and clearly if we're making mobile, for the most part, we can't, what do you do instead? Well, I'm going to tell you that, but first I'm going to tell you what motivated me to get this talk together. I've been thinking about the problem for 5 years, and over those 5 years running iOS Dev, I've been saying to different people that I think would be likely people, hey, would you want to come and give an onboarding talk? And they've all thought about it and gone, no. In fact, last year I asked Rich Turton, who works for Ray Wenderlake, about this, and he decided to give a talk on I am an idiot instead. But it's clearly important, but we don't talk about it nearly enough. So I'm hoping that this talk will help you with it. How I got motivated about it. So, about 5 years ago, we started working with the Aberaeron Heritage Society. This is their booklet. And it's a booklet about the historical buildings in Aberaeron. And they were interested in making it into an app, clearly not an app that's ever going to make any money or that they would have funding for. About 25 different buildings in Aberaeron have that shoveled-shaped plaque on them here. It's apparently an Aberaeron coal shovel. So this is the Town Hall's one, when it was built, and it's number 20 of the 20, whatever it is, buildings that there are in Aberaeron. The booklet has some information about each building and sometimes a picture of how it looked when it was first built. So for the Heritage Society's website, all they'd done was produce a PDF that you could download. But what would be the best way of making this into an app? Well, clearly the easiest solution that uses the GPS capability would be to take the information from the paper map, so that is the paper map it onto Apple Maps, and so that users can see where they are in relation to each landmark and call up information about it. And a lot of tourism mobile apps take that kind of approach, but we wanted to be just a little more ambitious. And this is pre-beacons, or we might have put beacons on all the buildings. But talking to visitors, we found out most of them do not go around the 25 buildings. Either they wander around one area of the town, or they look at specific types of buildings that are of interest to them. So, for example, Aberaeron has 3 toll houses, probably one on each of the roads. And so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you might go and look at the 3 toll houses. So we split the 25 buildings into a number of shorter tours, either by area of the town or by a specific theme. So the example here is from the public building tour. On the visitor's possession, this is the screen we're going to talk a bit about. So on the left here, the visitor's position, I can't find me dot. Oh well. Is the blue dot, as you would expect on an Apple map. And that's common for the iPhone. And the green number is where the British School is, which is the first building on the public buildings tour. When the visitor arrives near the British School, the screen on the right, when you're quite close to it, appears automatically and gives you information about it. So you use it, the map to go around. When you get there, it goes, hey, great, you've arrived. Here's the info on this. Here's a video, whatever it is. Then when they say done, then it goes on to the next screen. But perhaps the most interesting thing about these screens is the brown arrow. The brown arrow is probably the source of most of my guilt. Have you ever had that experience where you see where you are on your mobile phone and you see where you want to go to, but as you start going towards it, it gets further away? The brown arrow is an attempt to get over that. Interestingly, I only realized coming from Chester Station on Monday that Apple haven't done anything about this, but Google have got a little ring around it which has an arrow on it, which does almost the opposite of what my arrow does, which is another interesting discussion that I'm going to have to think about. So the brown arrow is an attempt to help people where they need to go. You're supposed to hold your phone, and when you see the brown arrow, you realize, looking like that, you realize the school is behind you, right? It is pointing to where you want to go. You turn around to the right direction, and then the brown arrow will be pointing towards the building because it will turn around and say, yeah, you're going in the right direction now. So it leads you towards the building. However, that is not an interaction that users are accustomed to. And so what we found, as we didn't do anything about it, but what we found as we, well, kind of did something, but not the right thing, as we worked with users was we would, at the start explaining to them, going, well, this brown arrow, what it does is this, okay? So that's like a help desk for those training people. That doesn't help the people who are going to download your app later, but it gets the people using. That's always a bad sign for the usability of your software. So because of that, we found ourselves thinking about how it is that you do guide users so you get to it. Our solution, clearly this brown arrow, ideally you'd have a solution that wouldn't need any explanation, but our solution needed explanation. Later on in my keys to user onboarding, I'll talk about making it better, but I'll also talk about actually guiding people, because even the better solution is not better. And I think when I tried to use the Android version of this, of the little arrow, I also didn't quite understand what it was doing for me. So some explanation would be good there. So this is our solution. It needs explanation. And like it says there, don't try this at home or ever. So we got the message. They required help with our method of guiding people around the historic buildings. So how do you do that onboarding? How do you make them familiar with this different way? So our solution was unsatisfactory enough that I thought about it for the last 5 years. And it looks like this if we start the app. Essentially, when the user starts the app, we showed them a set of green. Don't you love that green? Well, at least good contrast on it, though, going back to yesterday's talks. So essentially, there's a screen above it, and what the green tells you is what that screen is doing. And you have to hit the next button to go to the next one. There are about 8 of these screens. So the app starts up the first time, takes you through these screens, which isn't what you want to be doing. Going, oh, fine, fine, fine. You're not reading, you don't take it in, and you get to the end and you use the app and you go, what the hell is this brown arrow doing? So we didn't do it very well. So one of the things that users tried to do was to interact with the pictures, because the actual picture of the screen is not framed, it looks like it really is something you can interact with. And so where there's a done button, they would try pressing it and things, whereas actually that next at the bottom, so maybe a green line around would have helped it, but that's another story. Don't do this anyway. But we didn't do it well. Secondly, we're trying to give them loads of information when what they want to do is get on with trying the app. And nobody listens at that point. You give them these 10 screens, nobody will listen to you. That isn't what they want to be doing. So that's what led me to thinking, how do you make it as easy as possible for people to understand what your app does and how to use it? And I came up with these keys to onboarding. I'm going to go through 10 things. There's probably only 7 there, but you kind of pad them out a bit because 10 looks like so much tidier a list. And they range from general UX principles through the best way of explaining things to users and when to provide those explanations, finally through to specific mobile issues such as getting them to allow you to access the location, and that's when we'll get into the Code mobile app. What all these things have in common is that they're relevant to getting a new user confident with using your app. So the first one will be familiar to almost any of you who've done a computer science degree you'd hope that's got a bit of UI in it at all. User affordances. You design your interfaces so it's obvious to the user what can be done. So in my intro slides, I didn't do that. It wasn't clear that you couldn't do these things where you could see buttons and press them and nothing happens. So here's another app of ours where I wasn't responsible for the latest version of the UI, so I can be reasonably independent about things. It's the conference app for our iOS Dev UK app last year. On the bright side, if you look carefully, you okay? Oh, you're taking photos. If you look carefully, it does give you information about what each of the rows is about, but you do need to look. You do need to think. It might be better to just have a set of tabs or a set of buttons that take you to the different features. So that you would just have the titles, you could look through them, pick the right one, and then at the next level you start getting information. It's trying to give you information at this level. Even if you wanted this design, it might be better to have a stronger split between each of these rows. Yesterday it goes, only have one dot between, one little thin line between each thing. I look at this app and I go, need thicker lines. That's, it's not, especially because the things are different sizes, it's not clear where those splits are. So I'd actually go for thicker lines on this one. One of the bugbears of iOS since iOS 7 is flat design done badly doesn't give you a clear button of what is a picture of what is a button and what is not. So having more sensible affordances are good things. So a couple of times with that slide I've said it might be better to change something. But actually I've only said it might be better, and there is a good solution to finding out whether it really is better or not. And that's key item 2. You do whole wave usability. You try your system out on a small number of users. So we did used to try our system on users, and by kind of giving them information, we ignored the problems that were there. So if your default is just to try out your system yourself, you know exactly how it works. So this brown arrow, it works brilliantly. I've made it work. It points to the right direction, and I understand it. So trying it on yourself is not good enough. You've got to try it on real users. You won't otherwise find the things that users find difficult. Significant improvements to the usability of your app can be made by trying it on a very few typical users. When I first graduated, which is about 100 years ago, we had this kind of idea that usability was something that cost £100,000, okay? That you did it with many, many users in special places, and it took forever. Nielsen has a really interesting paper that says the optimum number is 5. I can refer you to it. You give them identified tasks to do, you observe the problems that occur, and then as you react to that thing, you try it again, but with a different 5. So if I try out this brown arrow on people and it doesn't work and I come up with a better idea, once I've done that, I don't try it on the same 5 because they understand what the problem is. I try it on some other 5 and see whether it's any better or not. So like I said, we found ourselves explaining that brown arrow to people, and that in itself is a giveaway when you do that usability test that you've got a problem. And what we probably should have done at that point was try something different and see how easy it was for users to use the interface without us telling them to do so. So this design that I've put up here makes the arrow look much more like a compass, possibly suggesting, well, I hope, that the arrow points in the right direction. But again, possibly, I hope. The way to find out is to try it on some real users and see whether it's more obvious to them. That's the only way in which we find out whether we are taking away some of those onboarding problems. Trying new users who didn't know how it works. So, if people have bought your app, the next thing to think about is that actually, if you're advertising it in the right way, some of the work of onboarding you may have already done it before they bought your app. If you have videos and screenshots that explain your app on iTunes, so perhaps screenshots with annotations to say this is what's happening and this is what people are doing, then users that are thinking about what they buy, especially if they're paying money for it, will, by the time they get to your app, have some kind of an idea of how it works. So that isn't a bad place to give them that information while they're investigating it. And here is an example of that for Clear. I really like Clear. I've been using it for years. It's a to-do list manager for those who don't know about it. And it uses quite a few different gestures. So there's quite a lot to get your head around. And this is what they've put in place as an app video. I nearly went into daddy dancing, or in my case, granddaddy dancing. The music here, I'm thinking, oh, this all newfangled stuff, and the younger ones of me are going, this old stuff that Steve likes, it's way in the past. The Clear video, you get an idea of how it works with lots of swiping and opening and closing gestures from that video. Then, when you get to the actual app, you're reasonably prepared to try and use those gestures. You know that flicking, you've got a list, flicking left does something, flicking right does something, and so forth. So on. While this is useful, it's clearly not sufficient. There are some quite complex gestures in Clear. And so what Clear also do is they have a set of screens, they're going back to my solution, set of screens, better screens than my screens, which you see when you start the app for the first time. However, my belief is that's almost as ineffective as it is in my app. I wouldn't be recommending that. So they've actually done a third thing then. They've got the video, they've got these set of screens at the start, and then what they have is, because you're trying to do a task manager, they have a list of tasks that say things like swipe left to delete, and that brings us to my next key for onboarding. So you do explanation during exploration. When they're trying to use your app, that is the time to get on and do something about it. So when you start Clear, you've got this list of tasks, and it tells you the things that you can do with Clear. And so you can try them. You can do a swipe to the left to delete. And you do it, and it will be deleted. And so you're exploring, you're getting your explanation while you're doing the exploration. Get your explanation while you're doing the exploration, which is really good. So they're explaining how it works. So let's get back to my source of guilt and pain, the Aberiron app. So what might work for the Aberiron app would be an overlay that told you how to use that arrow feature. Of course, the right way to find out is to try it on some users. And you might find that you need to do other things as well in that case. You might find you need to give the option of turning off such tips because they annoy users after a little while. So another way, that's one way of making overlays less annoying. A second way of making overlays less annoying is to not show them to everybody, but show them when they are needed. So that's use overlays to help if necessary, but maybe be cleverer about it. So maybe you don't need to show this overlay to new users. by default. But if they are there and it's pointing behind them like that, and they start going in this direction, maybe that's the point at which to show them the tip. Because if they like this, they see they are and they go like that, they clearly have understood what it's doing. But if they start going in the other direction, so you can be really be really cleverer about when you show these overlays. That's number 5. We're halfway through. Ooh, we've got a little time left. Exploration and celebrate easy wins. So this is the list of walks that you get from there. So essentially what we do is, when you start up this Aberrarian app, it says, there are these things, some of them take 2 hours, that's all 25, who wants to do that? You can do a short tour, which take you half an hour, but maybe actually what you just want to do is try something quickly and have a quick win. So that is kind of what Clear is doing when it says swipe left to delete. You swipe left, it deletes. You go, wow, yeah, I've mastered this, and you get that kind of positive reinforcement for it. So what we might do with the Aberrarian app is it has those list of tours that take at least half an hour, and if you're nowhere near the first building at this point, when you choose, because you might not know where these tours are, then you might say, yeah, walk a half an hour before you start this tour, and that would be crazy. So what you might do instead, given this map, so this map is there are buildings all around Aberrarian. So assuming you are somewhere in Aberrarian, or why else would you want a tour of Aberrarian, we could calculate when it started for the first time, what was the nearest building, and offer that as an experimental first-time use of the app. Ooh, you're near the town hall. Do you want to try going there first? And you go, yes. And it shows you the little arrow, and you go the right way, perhaps with a little tip. You go the right way, you get there, it goes, yay, you made it to town hall, gives you the information. Well done, you used it. Why don't you try a longer tour now? So celebrating those small wins, encouraging the user to do more. Okay, those are most of the ones that come out of that app, but once you start thinking about this, you start thinking about all sorts of things. And I'll give you some of the other no-nos that I see on apps and that other people see on apps. So there's this making people register unnecessarily. We saw the Airbnb app yesterday in a talk, but actually the first thing it says to you is log in. If you're not already an Airbnb user, and that's actually only because it's on mobile you're thinking of it, this is not a welcoming screen. And especially if you've had nothing to do with a company before, one of the things that makes people hate your app is you start it up and it says register, and you go, no way. I have no figures for this, but my guess is asking for registration loses you at the very least half the people that downloaded your app, unless there is a real need for that registration. So if it's your bank, everybody can see why they need to know who you are to give you your account details. If it's a credit card, same thing. But an awful lot, if it's Amazon, except they don't let you pay for things on things, you can kind of understand why that is the case. But for almost anything else, you go, why are you asking me for registration on this point? And certainly Airbnb is one of those things. How do I know that Airbnb is one of these things? The answer is because their website looks like this. Their website lets you search for places, and it gives you homes, experiences, places. I can find out the excitement of Chester on it. I can do all these sorts of things. Why isn't the app like that? So don't register. If you can let people explore your app without registration, you can convince them of the value of your site. And people have learnt this for web, and for some reason, a whole bunch of people have not learnt this yet for mobile. And you can get them to the place where they want to register. However, if they've done a bunch of business where they get to the place where you want to register, don't at that point throw away everything they've done. You've got to remember, they've ordered a whole bunch of things, perhaps because it's an e-commerce site. And they go, right, I want to buy. Well, you're going to need to register. And again, this is learning from websites. Websites at that point used to chuck away all you've done. They don't do that anymore, and neither should mobile. I'll come back to an example. I'll mention an example at the end which does exactly that. But that isn't something you should know. So no registration until it's needed, and when it's needed, don't forget what the user's done. So if you're asking for services, explain why, because otherwise the default is almost always no, unless the users understand why you're asking. So the Aberrarian thing is called Town Walks. Do you want it to access your location while you use the app? Allow, don't allow. That is the default prompt that you would get from iPhone. And why do you need permission? And actually, what happens is if you say don't allow, then it can't do anything because it's relying on GPS to know where you are in relationship to the buildings. So the other real thing that rings my bell is when it says, allow town walks to access your location while you use the instead of while you use the app, even when your app is not running. You go, why do you want to know where I am when I'm not using your app? I don't trust you. Go away. So this again is a big turn-off. So unqualified requests are much more likely to get the answer no. And a better version of this screen would look like this. If you don't allow, we won't be able to show you where great places are. Maybe that last bit should be positive rather than negative. Try it by user testing. But if you allow, we will be able to show you where. Yes, press allow to allow, so we will show you where great places are. So they may not be the right words, but we can find out which ones are, either through hallway usability to get a kind of idea, or if you've got lots of users, through A/B testing to find out which is best. In case you think this is not a real problem, I will give an example of the app I loaded last weekend. And I said, don't allow. They didn't give me any reason why I'd want to give him notifications to my phone. I went, piss off. Because that's what I do to all the apps that ask me for that. Notifications especially, but some of the GPS things as well. So what he should have said instead is, I don't know, just hands up. Who has loaded the app? Keep your hand up if you said yes to notifications. Oh, a number you did. It's slightly more than 50%, but not a lot more. What are the most exciting notifications I've missed? Okay, good. Sorry? You haven't sent them any?
We might have done start talk notification Android, I think.
Oh. Yeah. Okay. So the reason you didn't give me any reason why that is because you haven't got any reason. Okay, moving on. You shouldn't have bothered to implement that. You'd have been better off without it. So without good reasons, very often it's don't allow. I know that I talked to a couple of people who said, it was only going to be for 3 days, then I'm deleting it. So I went yes, because I don't care. But if it's an app you think will be on there for a long time, and you think this is going to hassle me for a long time, then you'd say no. At least I would. Do you say yes if they ask you for access to your address book as well? Okay, interesting. So one that needed it, you would need that kind of permission thing. So we're getting towards the end. Track how they used your app. So when they started using your app, you concentrated on getting them to be able to use the most popular features of your app. I didn't expect this to, I was going to just have it like that. I don't know why it does it in bits. So data analytics will tell you what your users are actually using and what they are not. So you can see if there are features of the app that they are not using. If you think they're really useful features, that is interesting information to you. So tracking your users and figuring out what is used and what isn't is a great thing to be doing. You can also use analytics to alert you when things might be going wrong. So if the users often start a sequence of actions that you would think of as a task, say buying something, but seldom finish that task, you can identify where it is they break off in it, and you can start to think about why that might be the case. So is there some incompatibility between their inputs and what the system is asking for? I have a friend who runs a company which analyzes web stuff, and one of the things they found by analyzing, doing proper data analytics was nobody in Canada could buy anything. They'd get as far as purchasing, and then it would ask them for an American postcode. And so they went, I'll solve that. And it's only by having data analytics you can find out this kind of thing. But the other reason they might not finish what you think is a task might be because you're doing something that they find strange. So if you are doing something different, if you've got a complex feature that is not easy to understand, this might alert you to that. And so what you can do is if you've got that kind of information, is introduce complex features more gradually. So if the analytics show a user is missing out on a great feature of your app that you think would be great for them, you can use that information to alert them to that fact at an appropriate later time. Clearly not too often, or you'll annoy the hell out of them. So this isn't actually a feature in Time Warps, but it might have been. That you could go around. Nobody's using that wonderful feature where you go around it blindfold. So I'll tell them about it. Do you want to try for it and get them into it? So if you've got advanced features that people aren't using that you think they would be interested in if they understood it, analytics gives you a way of getting to that place where you can tell them about it. So thank you. That's my top 10 features for user onboarding. This is kind of a list of really interesting things. I'll go straight through it. So Steve Krug's books, if you've not read Steve Krug books, they're pretty thin, 2-3 hours at the most. Don't make me think. He has added a mobile section now, but it was originally on web. And essentially he's saying, if you're making me think what to do, you're doing it wrong. You know, that you want to make it as simple as possible to use your app. So don't make me think. It's Not Rocket Surgery is a second book he wrote because people asked about usability. And he talked there about how to go through doing usability of websites, but apps as well would be under it. Dan Council talks about the kinds of things that you should put on a App Store screenshot, and that's relevant because, like I said, that's one of the places where people get an idea about what your app does, and that's a really interesting, even if you're not into user onboarding, if you're just into selling your app, that is a thing well worth looking at. Samuel Hullick, Elements of User Onboarding, is a book, but it's not a published book. You can get it online, and it's reasonably expensive. But essentially, he also has this website, Samuel Hullick, called useronboard.com. And in it, he does website and app teardowns every week. And last week's was, he did 149 screens, which had the United app in it, and commented on what he was doing at each point and how awful it was, and how their persona for dragging people off planes very much matched their persona for building web apps. And it is well worth a read, but actually so are previous ones in there. If you look through there, he tries to look at it with the eyes of somebody who doesn't know what this app is about and has not seen a lot of apps before, and say, how easy is it for me to do the things I need to do in this app? And if you look at those, you learn an awful lot about the right and wrong things to do in user onboarding. So thank you very much.